the presenters were saying, some of the things were relevant for individuals, others were relevant for us as a community or as a species as a whole. Others were more relevant for companies and others for policymakers. So that's also an axis or labels I could assign to all these statements. Then there's the aspect of local versus global impact, and also the element of time. A lot of the speakers started by looking at history, not surprisingly, to teach us about today and to give us some visions or even tangible tools to go towards the future. So that was part of this methodology. Can we put this in labels? But then at the same time, I thought, maybe not, let's not try to do this, because why putting stuff into boxes? And then I found out that actually the core of what we're trying to do here is look at all these talks and contributions, deconstruct them maybe into their building blocks, shuffle them around, and then turn them into our own narrative, which again can be a very dynamic one. And so that's what I try to do. And then I try, okay, what kind of narrative can I build? And I start.
Is it just me who can hear Koen?
Yeah, now I'm back. Sorry, I got deconnected in a way. Let me share my screen again. Sorry. Yeah, there we are. We're back. Yeah, okay, sorry, don't know what happened there. So again, I started to build this narrative for myself, and this is still for me phase one of the research, right? It's like finding out this methodology and the best way to also put into words or into results what I've learned. And when Baltan asked me to present to you my first findings, I think it kind of forced me or made me go into phase two. And for me, phase two is from this definition of the methodology going more towards how can I turn this into something that's valuable to me and maybe others. So rather than putting, let's say, my prototype narrative into words, I've constructed a small video, which I want to share with you now.
Before the coin lands, you know what to do. It is not so much that the coin will give you the answer, it will make you answer by pretending to answer for you. As if the solution to uncertainty is not certainty, but bluff.
And she said to me, "Are you ready?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so. Don't know for what I had to be ready, but I know if someone in Africa asks you that, you say, yes, I'm ready." And she walked with me into the bush. And we walked, and then we entered a cave. And we went deep into the cave. It was pitch dark in the cave. I don't know how long I've been there. An hour, 2 hours, 10 minutes, half a day, no idea. Mama Gerda came and got me. And she saw me and she said, "Now you're ready."
The word growth is rooted in the Proto-Germanic word grü, which means something like the land becoming green again in the beginning of spring. By giving a word to this specific moment in time and then extracting it from that particular context and time frame, as alphabet-based languages tend to do, its meaning and our intimate understanding of it mutated and was corrupted. Grü originally takes place in relation to what went before and what will come after.
What it's telling us, the way we're behaving with money, is telling us that we believe that in the future there's going to be a highly successful, vibrant economy, highly productive, highly wealthy, which is able to pay down that debt. And my central point is that it's not going to happen.
Trust has a soulmate. She's called money and will be our guide.
So here's an example that we worked with L'Oreal at one of their headquarters here in the Netherlands. It has around 250 staff in it. In the end of the first month, we had 75% of the staff actually sign up and use it. They carried out 4,000 actions in 1 month, and that equates or created a CO2 reduction of 8,000 kilograms, which is more than 60 flights from Amsterdam to Paris.
Trust me, I got this.
Now well beyond the control of a single man, yet for a moment supported by the breeze, it hovers around his head like a paper cloud. For a moment, he is a sorcerer, a wizard, the abstract promise of something truly magical. The ever-expanding newspaper somehow representing the ever-expanding reach of humanity. But in fact, this promise of abundance is central to all our most important religious texts. From the land of milk and honey in the Torah, to Al-Qatar in the Quran, or Jesus turning water into wine in the Bible. All you need is faith to hear the diesels humming.
96% of all the life on the planet has perished. And that came about also due to massive amount of CO2 released either due to a volcanic eruption or an asteroid impact, leading to global warming, changing ocean currents, ocean acidification, and you had the collapse of ecosystems. The sixth extinction that we are into right now, we can see species are already disappearing at more than 1,000 times the background rate. And this is the first extinction event that is not caused by a geological or an astrological impact event, but is caused solely by the activities of one species, and that being us human beings.
Trust me, you got this.
We need that bridge to heal the world. And your work is to build that bridge between science and the indigenous, between economics and the social, between culture and nature. Because all of that is one, and we tend to forget that.
There's a number of books that claim that the human history of ingesting these entheogens and psychedelic substances is basically what led to the evolution of the spiritual center in the brain, where we feel connected with nature. And it's quite a common effect that even if you ingest minute quantities of like some of these substances, you just feel much more connected to everything around us. But in our Western societies, we actually we favor productivity, and for productivity we want to have absolutely predictable behavior, as much as possible predictable behavior. So we've actually legislated against a lot of these substances, and we've taken them out of our natural diet, which means actually you can argue that maybe we are programming humanity for rational existence.
If we need to change the system, and we do, then we can grow the system. But at the same time, we have to stand our ground and say no to things that are happening in the current system. Exploiting people, exploiting nature, we have to say no.
I'm not asking governments to embrace post-capitalism. I am asking for them to think, as they take anti-crisis measures, about using those anti-crisis measures as a long-term play into a new kind of economy.
Trust me, we got this.
So I hope I've given you a little bit of insight and inspiration in the journey that me as a participant and lab reporter have gone through. And then allow me to welcome you again, because aside from being the opening speaker, I'll also be the moderator to walk you through this two-day conference. And I hope that by the end of these 2 days, from each of the presentations, and I not only hope, I'm quite sure, because I had a little bit of insight already in the abstracts of all the contributions that we're going to witness, that from all these presentations, again, new building blocks, new insight, new tools will come, so that after this two-day conference, we can build our own narrative even stronger. So welcome to this two-day journey. I hope you're all ready for it. And as I mentioned before, the Baltan Economia Festival has been, let's say, split up, or Baltan has come up with 3 labels for this festival. One is redesigning infrastructures, the other is shifting values, and the other is nature's economies. And let me ask Olga Mink, director of Baltan Laboratories, why did you come up with these labels and how?
Yeah, well, why did we come up with these 3 themes? We first, initially in 2017, we organized a festival with the same subtitle. And there we had a 2.5-day event. And so it was like a first initial scratching the surface of this kind of topic relating to our economy, and we discovered how broad this topic actually is and how entangled with so many different other disciplines, let's say. And so with the second edition, we wanted to still have this kind of broad view, but we also wanted to kind of make some clearer idea about how can we approach this, and how are artists, journalists, writers, scientists, how are they approaching this this theme, which is so connected to so many other fields. And we thought if these three themes that we defined, as you mentioned, would cover many of the people that we wanted to give a stage, and would perhaps give an interesting angle to understand better the topic of economy.
Okay, thanks a lot. And then the two-day conference is also built around these themes. So we will have, throughout these 2 days, we'll have 4 blocks of 4 to 5 speakers each. And each block has been built around one of these themes. And this morning's theme will be redesigning infrastructures. Olga, can you enlighten us a little bit more on what Baltan intends with redesigning infrastructures?
Yeah, so basically this theme revolves around the notion that it's not about changing a complex system, but it's about starting, it's not about starting from scratch, but actually it's about rethinking them, or redesigning them, redesigning the mechanisms of these infrastructures. And so, for example, work, health, transport, welfare, taxation, which are like the building blocks of this system. And once we look at these individual approaches and see how we could actually redesign them, perhaps a larger change could also be instigated, and also on a societal level. For example, we have a project about the future of work, which deals with emerging technologies, and also the role of the commons, which comply between state-driven or corporation-driven models. or like the Cartesian viewpoint, where we're kind of like looking at building blocks of our body, which is used in, for example, in healthcare. So these are just 3 examples that are in our program and deal with how we could redefine the infrastructure as a, and this is what the topic tries to do.
Okay, thanks a lot. So then I suggest we get started as soon as possible. First, some practical things. So in this morning session, we will have a lineup of 5 speakers for you. We will first listen to all the presentations, each time with a small introduction in between, and we will do a Q&A at the end of the session. So if you have questions for any of the speakers or all of them, please write them down either for yourself, or you can also already share them in the chat. You can do that in the public chat, or you can send a private message to me with your question. And then at the end, we will take the most relevant questions, see how much time we have. So that's just a practical thing. And then I think we couldn't have found a better, or Balban couldn't have found a better speaker than the first one. If it's about, as Olga said, redesigning infrastructures, maybe money is one of the most prevalent infrastructures of our economic system. And our first speaker, the title of his topic is about imagining the unimaginable when it comes down to the role and definition and use of money. So I'm very happy to introduce to you Dr. Austin Houldsworth. He's a multidisciplinary designer, researcher, educator, and an expert in critical and speculative design. And I'm very curious to hear all about his unimaginable imagination. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's great to be here. Yeah, I'll try and stay to time and not go too far over, and hopefully the technology won't fail me. So, oh, hang on, I need to share my screen first, don't I? Oh dear. Let's see if this will. Oops. Can you guys see that? Is it working? Excellent. So thanks very much for having me here. So this is part of my research, which I started, I don't know, quite a number of years ago now, probably back in 2012, 13. And I had funding, ironically, from Barclaycard, of all people, to do a PhD at the Royal College of Art, looking at alternative payment systems. I think they were so desperate probably back then after the financial crisis, they were turning to perhaps more left of field thinkers. But anyway, so the problem I had at the start of this kind of journey that I went on in trying to create alternatives to the present money that we understand now is it's shown in this image here. This was a project, or taken from a project that I did called Crime Pays back in 2013. And I'm not going to go into the project too much, but essentially it was extremely frustrating for me. The card that you can see on the desk here was a representation of what was embodied the system. It was the monetary artifact that I created. And I wanted to create a radical system. I wanted to create something completely different. And every time I wanted to design an artifact, all I could think of was the present understanding, you know, our card-based systems or money in the physical form, the kind of the cash that we carry around in our wallets. And considering I wanted to be radical and different, it drove me mad, because every time I thought of something different, well, no one would recognize this as money. How would I be able to explain this? And to illustrate the kind of completely unoriginal aspect of this monetary artifact that I came up with, they got the IBM magnetic strip, which was invented back in the 60s. So it certainly wasn't a progressive kind of artifact that I created. And I kind of felt a bit like this fish in this goldfish bowl, in that I was in this institution which kind of strive to push boundaries, but yet I couldn't even determine what boundaries were kind of inhibiting my imagination at the time. And I think part of design is inherently to kind of be quite intuitive and to fit within the current cultural context. And this is kind of taught probably as a foundational thing throughout design education. You want to do something that resonates with what people can understand and appreciate at the time. So I needed to develop a way to sort of like step out of my present time frame. So I came up with this kind of method, which I won't go through. I'm going to go through now in conjunction with a project I created with it. And the idea, it's called redefinition design. I gave it this kind of title to just label it really. But it starts with identifying, I'll make it a bit simpler so I haven't got so much text on the screen, but identifying underlying assumptions, so like axioms or beliefs, and then altering those axioms, and then trying to find a cultural context which is sympathetic to them, so not our present understanding of or culture, and analysing the levels, and then this kind of generative phase. So what is this kind of, what did I come across in terms of the assumptions? And I kind of took the assumption of the monetary definition of the definition of money, that it's a medium of exchange, a store of value, and unit of account. And this is the economics kind of explanation of what money is. And you can kind of trace it back to Aristotle, like 2,300 years ago, when it is his view of the Athenian system, and he wrote very similar kind of explanations. So I took this as the kind of the assumption that, as a belief in money, founded from Aristotle's observations. So the next, I altered this. So I got rid of, for this project, I got rid of the store of value function. So what would money be if it was a medium exchange and unit of account without this kind of long-term store of value? And then I needed to try and find a context in which this made sense. And I came across this book, a science fiction novel by B.F. Skinner, who was this behavioral psychologist in America. And he coined the term positive reinforcement, and he got little rats and pigeons to do all sorts of tricks by giving them some kind of positive reinforcement in this kind of Skinner box that he devised here. And he imagined this kind of conditioning technique, if it was applied to people and society, to get them to place society above themselves and their own self-interest. And within this book, he imagined this kind of egalitarian society, a planned economy with these kind of people who are not as selfish as currently we are. So it was an interesting framework. So it gave me, and the nice thing about kind of science fiction is often it doesn't have any money in it, or it has money as a plot device, or it is a utopia, so it doesn't have any money. It avoids the subject altogether. I asked Bruce Sterling about why this was a number of years ago, and he said, well, money's boring. I don't think it's boring, but maybe it just doesn't sell perhaps as well as space. And then I got onto the generatives phase of the project. So me stepping into this world with this altered notion of money and imagining what types of systems and contraptions would be created. So as it's a planned economy, I imagined that money could, essentially the work is on a ledger that people have to undertake. And maybe the central planners say that there's a certain amount of time allotted to a certain task, and then you record this task on the job. However, the problem with kind of top-down, I think, organisations is that the people on the ground and the people above, there's obviously a big divide in terms of what needs doing on the ground. Things take longer, things don't go correctly. So the actual responsibility of paying for the work is down to the individual in this context. As they are selfless individuals, they're conditioned to not abuse the system. So they pay themselves the money. And the money that they use is made out basically made out of potassium nitrate and sugar, and it's formed these kind of little smoke bomb capsules essentially. And the obligation in a transaction with this is that the seller helps the buyer destroy their money equal to the thing that they're purchasing. So the store of value ends there. But as everyone can pay for can earn money and doing things, and they pay themselves, then potentially there's always something that needs doing. So there's always the potential to earn and make a living from it. In this kind of burning of the money, walls and notes are created. So the smoke travels up these kind of tubes into the organ at the top, and then a C, and the denomination is equal to the note. So a C would be 1, a D would be 2, and then the duration is the amount. And I imagine that the central planning might listen to this kind of cacophony of economic activity that's happening over the landscape, and also hopefully maybe it would gauge whether the conditioning of the people is working particularly well. That might change if there is economic activity that doesn't make sense. But the problem with any of these kind of speculations is bringing them as well into reality to a certain extent, so they become a bit more believable and less dismissive as just fantasy. So this is the actual money incinerating organ that I built, and basically the potassium nitrate sits in these 2 chambers at the bottom. You light it, and the smoke travels up these tubes, and the notes are sounded at the top. So I've got a short video of that if I've got time, but do interrupt me if I'm going over a little bit. Have we got time to play? So thanks very much, guys. Yeah, if you wanted to look at some more of my work, it's you can see it here. So I'll end it there. Thank you. I think that's about the amount of time, right?
Yeah, right on time. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, you certainly triggered my imagination, so thanks a lot for that. So then let's move immediately to our next speaker, who is Melanie Rieback, and she's the CEO and co-founder of Radically Open Security, the world's first non-profit computer security consultancy company. And what I read from her talk is that it's going to be about post-growth entrepreneurship. And one sentence that triggered me in her announcement was, how can we use business? That's what she's going to teach us. One of the things, how can we use business as a form of activism? So I'm very curious to find out. And Melanie, the screen or the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. You all can hear me? Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and go to my slide deck. So just a moment. Great. Are you all able to see the deck now? Yep. Okay, excellent. So yeah, I would like to talk to you today about post-growth entrepreneurship. This is, of course, related to the concept of post-growth economics, which some of you might already be familiar with. And of course, when discussing post-growth economics, I'm talking about Tim Jackson and economists like Kate Raworth, etc. So first of all, what is post-growth entrepreneurship? Now, the idea is that in order to implement post-growth economies, we need to understand how to implement a post-growth business. Quite frankly, an economy is a meta concept, and an economy consists of, businesses, consumers, governments, nonprofits, educational institutions, etc. So, of course, though, for those of us in the startup ecosystem and in the business world, one of the most ubiquitous constructions that, quite frankly, is shoved down our throat is the exponential curve. If you go to MBA programs, if you go to pretty much any startup incubator, as a founder, as an aspiring founder, one of the first things they will tell you is that the way to build a business is 3 steps: capital, scale, exit. Right? So capital in the sense of venture capital, scaling in terms of the exponential curve, and then exit, which is essentially pulling that value, extracting that value out of your company. But of course, we know what kind of social effects this system has. From the moment you accept venture capital, you lose quite a measure of control over your company. The exponential curve really solely, serves the purpose of getting to the exit moment in a short amount of time, 3 to 5 years, and then of course exiting the IPO, direct listing, merger acquisition. This is sort of one of the main purposes of business, and this is actually taught as being the definition of success in business in my categories. So. So basically, but of course, this is really problematic because this short-term thinking leads to all of these, so-called externalities, which of course, as Kate Raworth quite accurately says, there are no externalities. And the point is that as the value is pulled out of the system, someone has to pay the price. So I've been working the last number of years on the concept of nonprofit business. Which basically means that what happens if you can eliminate financial extraction from businesses completely, So I've come up with a definition of what I'm calling post-growth entrepreneurship. And the 3 steps, as opposed to capital scale exit with the Silicon Valley model, is bootstrapping, flat growth, and non-extraction. And, flat growth, coming back to the example used by Kate Raworth in her TED Talk, where she talks about how growth is handled in nature. Like, let's say you have a tree, the tree at the beginning of its life grows almost exponentially, but at a certain point, that growth begins to flatten out, and it stops growing, and it starts thriving. At a certain point, if the tree wants to grow further, well, it can't because it's already reached its maximum size. But what does it do then? It drops seeds, And continuing to look at nature, the only example of something in nature that grows exponentially forever is cancer. And of course, this is harmful to any ecosystem that it's living in. So, but this all sounds like really nice theory, but I think that we need to actually go past theory in order to be able to build this new economy. We need to actually start making changes in how we as entrepreneurs are running our startup ecosystem. So I myself have been running a post-growth company. And essentially, the idea is very similar to Muhammad Yunus's concept of social business. I don't know how many of you have read some of his books, such as Building Social Business, but Yunus defines social business as follows: no dividend companies for solving human problems. Of course, the majority of the world jumped on his ideas and they thought solving human problems, awesome, but no dividend. We didn't. We'll pretend we didn't hear that. But this is actually one of the problems with social enterprise as it's currently implemented. Social enterprise is still extractive. If you look at a company, say like Tesla, and Elon Musk, you have to ask yourself the question: is it a social enterprise? Is it not? I mean, obviously, solar cars are great, disrupting the car market, and in that sense, of course, what Elon Musk is doing is awesome. But at the same time, why does he have to be the world's best paid CEO? I mean, there's obviously such a large amount of financial extraction coming from Tesla that it's hard to consider that, to be a social enterprise anymore. So, I think that, and this is sort of one of the problems with the social enterprise ecosystem. I think as long as it remains extractive, we're not going to be able to optimize for positive impact. And the problem is that this Silicon Valley model of capital scale exit has just been fully adopted by the social enterprise ecosystem. And what that means is that, if you go to the impact hubs or the social enterprise NLs, all of their founders, they're still being taught impact investment scale, and then impact exit. And this leads to the kind of social enterprise ecosystem where, our B corporations are getting acquired by Unilever, and we need to ask ourselves, is this actually the effect that we're going for? So what I attempted to do with Radically Open Security, which is my computer security company, is we tried, so Muhammad Yunus has two kinds of social business, type 1 and type 2 social business. Type 1 social business is completely extraction free, but reinvests all of its profits into operation of the social business. And a type 2 social business, all of the extraction goes to charity. So essentially what I did is I used an obscure tax construction called a Fiscaal Fondswervende Instelling in Dutch, a fiscal fundraising institution, and to basically give all of my profits to charity. So when I say all of my profits, actually 90% of my profits, and then the last 10% is my cash flow buffer, because I need, of course, a cash flow buffer in order to be able to run a business. But what that means is that it's the opposite of philanthropy. The with philanthropy, you get rich first and then you donate it to charity. Whereas with what we're doing right now, I'm actually building that donation to charity into the core of my business model. And as of so far, my 6.5-year-old security company has donated more than 250,000 euros to an internet-related charity called the NLNet Foundation that supports open source, digital rights, and anything for a better internet. So I took the concept of nonprofit business that I was prototyping with Radically Open Security, and I started a business incubator called Nonprofit Ventures. I've been now for 2.5 years giving workshops and mentoring to actual startup founders, to help them to essentially copy Radically Open Security's business model, but then in other areas besides computer security. The funny thing is, again, if you look at social enterprise, I think one of the places where social enterprise gets it wrong is it tends to be laser focused on the sustainable development goals. And as much as we love the SDGs, because I mean, who doesn't love, Africa and clean drinking water and solar panels? The truth is, only 1% of the companies in the planet have anything whatsoever to do with the SDGs. But the other 99% of those companies have nothing to do with the SDGs, but they rule the world. So I think with social entrepreneurship, we need to stop being completely focused on the SDGs, and we rather need to be asking the question, what about those other 99% of businesses? I like to call them boring but necessary, businesses. So how can we take that other 99% and how can we make them social? I think that the answer to how can we make them social is eliminate extraction, and try and make these businesses post-growth. So I also created a course at the Free University of Amsterdam called Post-Growth Entrepreneurship. And we piloted it about a year ago to about 20 people to very good reviews. And Post-Growth Entrepreneurship is currently worth 6 ECTS points as an internship in the business school at the Vrije Universiteit. So we already are starting to rewrite the business school curriculum. We also are working together with the University of Amsterdam to put post-growth entrepreneurship online as a MOOC on Coursera. So as you can see here, there's a picture from the recording studio, and there's actually already a sample teaser video that we've put online that's available via our YouTube channel. Of course, the MOOC isn't finished yet, so it's not on Coursera yet. We're still in the process of building it. But our idea here is to take this course that we're already piloting here in Amsterdam, and once it's available for free on Coursera, the idea is that every business student in the world can see, what is this? Post-growth entrepreneurship from the University of Amsterdam? WTF? What is this? And why is it not in our business school? So another project that we did is we organized a startup boot camp. This was right before the lockdowns in March of 2020. And it was a 1-week startup boot camp in Terschelling. So we had a group of 13 participants and another 5 organizers. And it was a really intensive week that was sort of a combination between a personal development retreat and a startup boot camp. You can see, the participants, we had personal development aspects such as meditation, as you can see on the bottom left, a lot of topics, also some, like you can see the artist's way in some of these books, nonviolent communications, reinventing organizations, discussing non-hierarchical, decentralized management, but also there was work, and you can basically see some of the business model canvases, the post-it notes, and on the upper left, Claire, who was basically working on her business. And we actually got, out of the 13 participants, 2 currently, running startups, brand new startups that spun out of that week. And they're currently running with a not-for-profit business model. We're prototyping this, and it's exciting to think that if every time we run this boot camp, we can start getting 2 new examples out of it. That's awesome. So, because of course, it takes one company like Radically Open Security to be an exception to the rule. It takes maybe 10 companies to start being kind of an interesting curiosity. 100 companies to really start being a movement. And of course, if it starts here in the Netherlands, it can spread everywhere else all over the world. I'm also busy working right now on writing a book. I'm still working on it. I'm very happy actually to share what I'm working on with those of you who are interested. I'm in the process right now where I'm actually looking for feedback. And the book basically is going to be a companion to the course at the university and the MOOC, and it's also used as training materials at also for the incubator program. And we're going to be launching a brand new incubator program in Q4 for another class of participants. So we've won a lot of awards for our work. CIO magazine had called me the most innovative IT leader of the Netherlands for my work with Radically Open Security. And also the European Commission called me one of the 9 most innovative women in the EU for this work that I've been doing. It really isn't about me. I think it's about these ideas, and it's not just about the theory of how do we build a post-growth economy, but I think what makes it different with what we're doing with post-growth entrepreneurship is that we are doing this, getting our hands dirty, and we're actually building this. So Anyway, so I think to close this off, I just want to say, you know, I want to re-envision how people can think about business and entrepreneurship in MBA programs and also in incubators, and not just for social entrepreneurs, but for everyone. We can think of business as being one of the most powerful forms of activism, and we can think of business as being a mixed media for art. Business can be a vehicle for spirituality. It's not a coincidence that the Buddhists call right livelihood the fifth of their noble eightfold paths. So thank you very much. If any of you would like to get in contact with me, please go to postgrowthentrepreneurship.com, or otherwise Google Melanie Rieback, and you can find my email address easily, or we can connect on LinkedIn. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Melanie. Then let's move on to the third speaker of this morning session, and that's James Richards. He's the director of Chromatope, a UK-based innovation and development consultancy. And he was wondering, why does a bank card look like a bank card? And what could it look like if we let our imagination run wild? So having already learned that the first magnetic strip was invented in, what was it, 1986 or something, 1968, I'm now curious what more I can learn about bank cards. I give the screen and the floor to James.
Thanks very much. I'm just going to try and share my screen, so let me know if this works. How's that? Can you see that okay? Yeah, great. Okay, so I'm just going to stop the timer. Thanks very much for today. My name's James. I'm director of Chromatope, digital innovation, creativity and development business. Every day with a wave of our hands, we manipulate hidden fields and virtual clouds to buy or trade what we need to eat, drink, sleep and travel. What kind of arcane magic is this? Why, contactless, of course. But what would it be like if the rituals and practices of our everyday bank card transactions were more significant? What if we could design for understanding and have interactions that lead to a deeper understanding of our places in personal, national and global economies? Today, as part of the Economies magic conversation, we'll consider the Hermetic bank card. We'll think about how bank cards of all types could figure more positively and prominently in the fabric of our economic lives. And we'll have a think about how the form, function, identity and meaning of the card has been shaped over time, and imagine their magical potential in a reimagined economy. So credit cards have been around for a long time, with the original concept described first in 1887 by Edward Bellamy in his utopian novel Looking Backward. Various coins, plates and medals were in use through the 1920s and 30s, with the charger plate, which you can see on screen now, in use in the US from the 30s to the 50s. These analog dog tags held a slip of paper with the credit status of a shopper and were kept in store. The big change came in the 1950s with the Bank Americard and the Master Charge. These were universal systems that made credit cards and credit available to everyone. This offer of credit to everyone included mass mailouts known as drops. These drops encompassed just about anyone, including people who'd never be able to pay back the debt that they ran up. President Johnson's special assistant Betty Furness described this practice that was outlawed in the 1970s as like giving sugar to diabetics. So cut to today, and they were getting on for an estimated 25 billion credit cards in use worldwide. And these little rectangles of PVC are the ubiquitous mortar that cements the blocks of capitalism, and so much more. So bank cards have become one of the means by which we verify our identity. We literally use a plastic card to show that we're who we say we are. Cards have come to represent our legitimacy within society. They prove who we are and also that we're old enough and trusted enough to have a bank card. By being granted a card, then we're passing through one of the rites of passage into adulthood. And by accepting a card, we're accepting liability for the debts that we incur. Bank cards authenticate us and acknowledge our role within economies as valued earners and spenders. The credit card that validates us can easily be spoofed, of course, and used to steal our identities and our money. Criminal revenues from the data that powers our cards and identifies us is estimated to be around $100 billion a year and is growing at a pretty unbelievable 40% annually. So we rightly fear losing our cards, our money, and our identities. When we lose a card or have one stolen from us, we lose something of ourselves. Our economic identities embodied in super-capitalist bank cards are fragile and fleeting. They appear temporary and transient and are lent to us by the banks and corporations that can easily take away what has been given. The rarest and most exclusive of credit cards are potently ostentatious physical manifestations of desire and privilege. Access to these cards is occluded. They are legendary. The story goes that the black card was dreamed into existence and born from a rumour of a card so exclusive that only 2 people in the world owned one. A card so rare that it had to exist and now does. You can't simply have enough money to apply for this card. You have to be invited into the group. This exclusive cult rewards members for their wealth and discretion. You and I will never be part of this club. An American Express Platinum card can be yours if you spend $50,000 a year. The black card or Centurion is by invitation only, and it's thought you need to be spending and paying back around $250,000 a year to qualify. Bank cards compete to offer the rarest and most exclusive cards. The JP Morgan Reserve card is coated in palladium. The Dubai First Royale MasterCard has a 0.235 carat diamond embedded in it and is trimmed in real gold. Many of these exclusive cards offer access to an around-the-clock, anywhere in the world concierge service. These services are the conjurings of jinn-like entities, invisible spirits at the end of a phone who can bring us our heart's desires. Tickets for concerts, tables for dinner, maybe even, if rumours are to be believed, company for the night. In a magical context, these cards represent wishes fulfilled, imagination embodied, and will exercised. Cards of all types have become sigils to harnessing the imaginable power of wealth and, of course, privilege. The incantations and flourishes of our wand-like cards, watches, and fingers has brought the death of folding money and coins. Our mass, contactless working is woven amidst an impossibly complex web of interrelated ecosystems of stocks and economies, artificial intelligences and human agents, economic technicians and wizards, overt and covert manipulators, fluffers, adjusters, statisticians, forecasters, data scientists, and weirdos. Within our new economies, we have killed money in its literal, real, and traditional sense. In sacrificing money through death by 1 trillion contactless blows, we have imagined a new ephemeral economy, a virtual economy of protean algorithmic complexity and interaction. The card is one of the few remaining hooks into the real, and we cling to them in a world where the definitions of money and wealth appear to change even as we observe them. The magnum opus of magicians and alchemists was the creation of the philosopher's stone, a substance that would turn base metals to gold and offer immortality. Our cards are truly the prima materia, the agent that transforms the valueless into gold, or indeed anything else we might want. This image shows one of several gold vending machines owned by the Ex-Orient Lux company, light from the east. Wield your plastic card and turn base binary into gold. Cards then have a special significance for us all. They signify our path into material society. They provide the scaffolding for the necessities of contemporary consumerist culture. Cards are presented to us as both a utility and an enabler. But do we have the cards we deserve? Are cards tools in our service, or rather is it us who serve? What if we had cards that better represented their function in our lives? A situationist style card made of stone or lead that represents the weight of our debt. A card that gradually abrades the other cards in our pockets, slyly destroying the competition. What if at the point of contactless swiping, our card screamed in anger or cried out in shame? Curiously, with so many areas of life moving beyond recognition, cards have remained relatively unchanged in the last 20 years. A more likely scenario than a screaming bank card is one where the banks, which already know vast amounts about us, move decisively to make the most of the cards they've already placed in our pockets and our lives. Our cards, rings, phones, or whatevers will act as co-pilots for life, Caliban-type spirits that know our habits, means, and limitations, and which anticipate and respond to our needs. Our rewards for being the lubricating oil of the economy may be the hyper-personalization of meals, health offers, and experiences shaped to our personalities and preferences. As we think about a better, fairer economy and the society we want and deserve, we must consider the role of the bank card. We may be the oil of the economy, but our collective actions can act as lubricant or sand in the gears of the machinery. As above, so below. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, James.
Pleasure.
Well, your presentation triggered me that over the past years, I from time to time had this idea like one of the legal obligations we have, at least as Belgian and also I think Dutch and other countries' citizens, is to have a bank account because it's needed to get access to all kinds of other services. And sometimes I start thinking like, isn't there a way to step out of this system? Right? How far can you go to not have an ID and not have a bank account, and not because you're a refugee or whatever, but as a deliberate choice? And then I think, isn't there a place, isn't there a society, isn't there a country where I could move to that has more different kind of systems in place related to this type of topics? And then I think this brings us to the next speaker. Who is Max Haarich, if I pronounce it correctly, and he's a Munich-based freelance consultant on ethics and artificial intelligence, and he's going to talk to us about the Republic of Uzupis. And from what I understood from his abstract, maybe that could be the place where you can step out of our existing system. So I'm very curious, and Max, I give you the microphone.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I wish it will become that place, and we can now work on that. So let me try to share my screen with you. Can you see my screen right now? Can you see my presentation? Thank you. Okay, the Republic of Uzupis. What is this? Because I think, may I ask how many of you have heard about it or been there before? Okay, no worries, no worries. I will try my best to explain what it is as far as I understood it myself. So Uzupis is a self-declared independent artist republic located in the UNESCO World Cultural Heritage Site of Vilnius. It's in Lithuania. It was established in 1997 after the breakdown of the Soviet Union. It has an area of 0.7 square kilometers, and about 7,000 citizens live there, and 1,000 of them are estimated to be artists. They have their own government, their own coat of arms, their own constitution, their own currency, and so on, which I will show later. But I have to say, it's not like this real separatist movement. It's rather kind of double exposure, and it's like it's a totally different world, but it still exists in the normal world. I mean, just to spoil it before, we all pay our taxes, so we're not that free as many people wish, but still I think it's a big source of inspiration for new ideas, because Uzupis has a special kind of thinking based on first of all, humor and paradoxy, and I will try to convey this spirit a little bit in the next slides I've prepared for you. So how did it all come to be? This was Uzupis after the breakdown of Soviet Union. The Uzupis is the name of a district across the river, it means, because it's across the river of Vilnius, and everything looked like this, totally run down, dominated by poverty and violence. And as like everywhere, this is the place where artists can afford a place to live and where artists start moving and settling. But it's, as I told, I mean, the main street is this old picture, what's simply called the Street of Death, and this was not for fun. And so people that lived there, they had to change something just to save their lives. And it all started with a foolish dream. This is a picture of our president, and he became president by dreaming he was a president. And one day he woke up and told his friends, hey, I had a dream, I was a president. I think I'm a president of this area right now. And his friends said, hey, wait, stop, my friend. If you're the president, I will be the minister, and so on. And suddenly the government was formed. And this is how it came to be. I mean, it's like people say, I mean, sometimes this looks like a totally beautifully democratic republic. In fact, it's a dictatorship. I mean, we have this president for 20 years now, and he can dictate anything, but he never wants to, and he would be happy if anybody else would step up and say, I will do your job. And this is how you get an official post in Uzupis. You just start doing this. There's no election whatsoever. Once you say, I'm the minister for this and that, you are from that moment. So they had this idea of bringing the community together and save themselves from their misery, and they called out this republic to give a shared project or movement or spirit or idea where everyone can participate. And they designed their coat of arms. This is the flag, and there are countless interpretations of what this flag might mean. And whenever you read a new text about Uzupis, I'm also surprised, because I will always find a new interpretation of the flag. But I think the one that's most fitting here is, it says, what you could interpret is that it's a hand with a hole inside. And one interpretation is that many problems come from people hoarding too much money. So the simplest solution would be, if you had a hole in your hand, money would fall right through. So no possibility to hoard money at all the problems solved in this little way of thinking. And so people, they put up a constitution to put some more content behind these ideas, and to give an outlook of what this living together might look like, and how they should look at each other, look at the environment. And there are really nice articles inside there, like everyone has the right to live by the river Vilnius, and the river Vilnius has the right to flow by everyone. I mean, this is a constitution granting rights to nature, which I don't know if any other constitution in the world does this. Everyone has the right to love and take care of the cat. This is a beautiful picture from a national parade. No one has the right to violence. We had a small army of 13 men in the beginning, but it was against the constitution, so they never went to action or something. But we have official protection by the Dutch military if anything happens, but I think there would be no reason to attack Uzupis. And there's, for example, this article, everyone may share what they possess, and the Uzupis is great in achieving a lot by being totally unspectacular. They just do simple things, like the Feast of the White Blanket. It's like when you have holidays like Easter holidays, people cook a lot, and there's often a lot of food left over. And then the next day, somewhere, this is on the terrace of the Uzupis government bar, somebody puts a white blanket, and it's a ritual. Wherever you see a white blanket in Uzupis put up somewhere, you can go there, add your food, just sit down with the people, and everybody can share what they still have. And so this is how they actually really got out of this misery and got the people together and started doing great events, engaging everyone, like very totally accessible, low level, and not by being too like telling like, yo, now we found the idea on how to save the world. No, they did this only for themselves, only to save themselves. There was no missionary attitude behind this. But what the thing is that is very peculiar is their the strengths of paradox, because I think today we have a very kind of logicistic thinking. It's like everything needs to make sense and needs to be ordered into something which is true or false. And we try to have a kind of unified system of knowledge. And Uzupis says, oh, this will lead to a lot of trouble because people fight for what is right or wrong. But if you stick to paradox and say things can be right and wrong at the same time, and you have many more options, because you don't have to stick to the things that make sense. I mean, they gave themselves a constitution nobody had to care about. One of the constitutional articles is you have the right to forget about all your duties, which is like, this would normally be the end of any rule system, but somehow it works, and maybe works better than other rule-based systems. And now coming to the economics of Uzupis, we're very proud of our Uz euro, which is one of the most stable currencies in the world, because it's simply tied to the price of a beer in the Uzupis government bar. So it has been the price of a beer in 2013 when it was initiated the first time, and it's still the price of a beer, while you can see clearly all the other currencies have inflated heavily. So if you're fine with the economy based on beers, this is a very nice currency for that. And we have ambassadors, about 500 plus worldwide, trying to spread these messages and build bridges to other areas, and see where other people might benefit from the thinking, or where Uzupis might benefit from other areas. And this is, for example, our Munich embassy, where we care about building bridges between arts and technology. For example, you see a humanoid consul Roboy who cares for the naturalizations to grant you the citizenship. So it's the first artificially intelligent diplomat worldwide. And we just for myself, I want to better understand why Uzupis works. And so we also founded this Institute for Applied Paradox, just to get more into the thinking and starting to develop financial products, like call it the Götterdämmerung index, an index that will indicate the end of the world by checking special financial assets. And we have also the inverse product, where you can become the richest man in the world exactly when the world ends, just to show this actually works. I mean, this is how the economy, right? Some people make money. And so we also have a project where we started doing fun with gold investments, because right now in the crisis time, you cannot go wrong with gold. And we try to invest in gold and also fuel the crisis that are behind this. So to make the gold worth more, and then to finance projects in Africa and help people with that, and also bring it on stage together with the theater group and do some crazy stuff. And I think this is about what I can tell in 10 minutes. And thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thanks a lot. And exceptionally, I'm going to take one question. The question from James. Can we join?
I mean, of course you can join. It's very nice. I feel very honored that this question comes up after my talk. The fun fact is, as soon as you ask this question, you already joined Uzupis. If you like to have a kind of a certificate or something which proves to you, I could manage this. If you just write me, and I have to check whether the Telegram chatbot is still online, where you could talk online with Roboy. Otherwise, we will find some way. There you can also order some ID cards, but I think the totally Uzupian way is just to draw your ID card yourself, because you're a unique person, so you deserve a unique ID card.
Okay, so
thank you for this question.
Yeah, no, don't worry. So it's in line with, if you want to do something, just start doing it, right? So
Exactly.
I really like that philosophy.
Perfect.
Okay, thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And moving on to the final speaker of this session, who is Olga Sorenson. I think we've talked about money and bank cards as being instruments of our economic infrastructure. I think another very strong illustration of our societal infrastructure are nations, or the notion of nations and frontiers. And I think, if I understand correctly, our last speaker comes from the US, and there they know a thing or two about nations and territories and frontiers. And Ollie is going to enlighten us about how this, let's say, fixation of territories is now also moving into the digital and virtual space. So I am happy to give the floor to Oli.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Thanks. I'll just share my screen. And this is, check. Oops. Okay. Okay, can we see the screen? Yeah, okay, thanks a lot. All right, so let me take away this. Oh, that's not good. It's not ideal. Just give me a second. Oh, the view is where. Okay, I'll just switch my screens because it's a little bit tricky here. Sorry about that. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just switch around this. Oh yeah, that's what I need to do. And then switch displays. Okay, can you still see my screen? Is it kind of the wrong screen? View share. Okay. So, that's better. So
I think we see your presenter's view now.
yeah. Okay. Right. So okay. So we can switch displays.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Can you see the kind of little screens of everyone?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll try and take that away.
Yeah, we just see your, you don't have to take things away. We see your presentation now.
Oh, fantastic. All right.
Yep.
Okay. Fantastic. So, all right. So I'm just going to say hi to everyone and thanks to Economia conference for having me. Just to say I'm a visual artist. So just today, what I'll try and do is provide as many cues, visual cues as possible to make my points. And also I may add that I'm just talking to you from Canada, from Montreal. So it's currently like 5:30 in the morning. So just please be gentle with me. Okay, so my talk aims to shed a new light on our current global economy, dominated by an ideology of market deregulation, which I find is actually rooted in the American myth of the frontier, which originates in the so-called Wild West. Okay, so what exactly is the frontier? It's a romantic representation of the 18th century United States, which recently broke away from its English motherland and set forth to expand onto the vast fertile lands to the west of the Appalachian Mountains. So the term frontier is synonymous with border, which typically defines a line at the edge of two nations, but in this story it outlines the edge of the Western civilizations, that is supposing that only wilderness lies on the other side. Interestingly, the concept of the frontier was articulated only retroactively by Frederick Jackson Turner around the turn of the 20th century, to portray mainly ranchers and gold prospectors as the actual protagonist of the American way of life, which was not forged in urban centers, but from the great outdoors, which is perceived as an unlimited opportunity for the rugged and self-reliant individuals. So these frontier folks that Turner talks about observed no allegiance to institutions, to standing armies, or the aristocrats that once owned the land and charged hefty rents. No, these lands, these plains of the original frontier were practically free for the taking. So I say practically because this expansionist rhetoric overlooked the prior settlements of First Nations already established on the territories being transformed into farmlands and mines and displacing Native Americans through violent action. And this border, and as this border between civilization and the wilderness progressed westward through continental America. So if we present it this way, the economy of the frontier fits within a larger age of discovery, the period initiated in the early 15th century when Europeans started exploring the global trade routes, conquering the America for natural resources, and enslaving Africans as human resources, as enacted by the likes of Christopher Columbus and others. So in fact, the parallels between the frontier and colonialism are so intimate that authors like Luke Olson and Catherine Richter refer to this period of American history as domestic colonialism. So such overt expansionist talking points are actually frowned upon these days, but I claim they've not completely left our shores. So when the explorers reached the Pacific West Coast around 1890, which is America's natural continental boundary in California, and when the remaining wilderness was enclosed in parks and reserves, the frontier mindset did not fade, actually, but endured in the American imagination through Hollywood's nascent cinema industry, and which established a Western as a major filmic genre to depict heroes like Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett fighting against Indians and Mexicans, and sometimes even against blacks, as in D.W. Griffith's 1915 feature film, Birth of a Nation. So in addition to cinema, the American urge for expansion found new application within scientific innovation, I find, particularly during the 1950s with the emergence of the space age. So alongside Race to the Moon against the Russians, the space age fed new life into the American dream of conquest. And in this wholesale move from an actual terrestrial conquest to a wishful extraterrestrial conquest, this move is best summarized in Toy Story 2, when Prospector Pete explained to Sheriff Woody in two syllables why toy cowboys came out of fashion overnight. And so the reason is Sputnik. So indeed, in the 1957 launch of the Russian satellite, this initiated decades of enthusiasm for space stories and science fictions. But if we pay close attention, we find uncanny echoes of colonialism in this narrative genre as well. So if we take, for example, the intro sequence of the original 1966 Star Trek TV series, we can hear Captain Kirk endorsing this new age of discovery in his spoken words, and I quote, says, "Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise, its mission to explore strange new worlds and new civilizations to boldly go where no man has gone before," unquote. So yes, we do see the similarities, but in concrete terms, space exploration has shown limited results compared to its imagined stories in films and comic books, where the galaxies are littered with space cowboys and bounty hunters, and yet the majority of aliens are cast as either enemies or supporting actors in an essentially human odyssey. So therefore, I claim that a more relevant successor to the 19th century legacy of the frontier is cyberspace, the electronic frontier. From the West Coast and Silicon Valley, from the very physical limit imposed on the first frontier, from there was torn open a portal to a virtual wilderness, which now promises exponential growth in the 21st century. In this context, is it any wonder that the early internet was saturated with metaphors of the age of discovery, such as Netscape Navigator or Internet Explorer? Such conceptual links between the Wild West and the World Wide Web are actually celebrated by cypherpunk John Gilmore, activist John Perry Barlow, and technology entrepreneur Mitch Kapoor, who together created the Electronic Frontier Foundation. So these associations apply in many other aspects. And another example I like to quote is the Getty family. So just as John Paul Getty made his fortune extracting oil from physical territories, his son Mark Getty made his fortune as the founder of Getty Images, this time by extracting image royalties within virtual territories. However, I find such fortunes do not flow freely for all. Like the Aboriginals in the first iteration of the frontier, entire communities are cast aside from the electronic frontier as inconvenient parts of the wilderness on the wrong side of the digital divide. We can demonstrate that by the string of hostile takeovers that Microsoft enacted since 1987, absorbing Hotmail, Skype, LinkedIn, GitHub into their conglomerate assets without any concern to the impact on economic diversity. And Facebook actually goes one step further in the hostilities by treating its users as livestock. So indeed, Facebook users are not the actual customers, but merely objects in an economy of attention, which is extracted and sold to advertisers, the real customers of the online platform. So such ruthless maneuvers are common, I think, in technology sectors and typical of the frontier mindset. So on the other hand, I celebrate the pushback enacted, for example, by the US Senate's recent anti-monopoly trials, which tried to break up Apple, Amazon, Facebook, and Google. And I welcome all the many grassroots actions on the copyleft and free software movements promoting access to technology. And in these and other ways, we must keep the tech corporations in check, since they seldom innovate from a blank canvas. Their commodities often impede onto already existing spaces. They introduce measures that are often harmful to the environment and affect precarious workers in electronic sweatshops around the world. So most urgently, we must stop the frontier logic by which nature is thought of as a free and disposable wilderness from which to purely extract wealth. And likewise, we must stop thinking about people as mere consumers or even as the objects of new business ventures. So to close, I just want to reiterate my claim that this frontier logic is not new and it's common to yesterday's cowboys, spacemen, and to today's coders operating in a virtual world that is also described as a land of opportunity. But again, these opportunities are never staged on a level playing field. As we move forward in time, such opportunities are actually getting restricted to an even lower number of players. So for the rest of us in the wilderness, this raises urgent concerns of economic injustice. So that's all we'll say for this 10-minute intervention. So thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Ollie, for this elaboration. I really like your subtle slip of the tongue, the World Wide West. And if we talk about redefining infrastructures, that might be a very good definition for the internet at the moment. I also like that at some point you said that the border between, when you were talking about Native American territories, the border between civilization and the wilderness. And I'm thinking like, okay, what is civilization and what is the wilderness in this explanation? So thanks a lot for giving us some food for thought around all of this. So this brings us to the end of the presentations, and between now and let's say our local time, 12 o'clock. So for Ollie, for you, 6 in the morning maybe. We will have some Q&A, so we have 15 to 20 minutes. And I'm going to try to recap some of the questions that have been posted in the chat. And let me start with the first question to Austin. Austin, if you're still there, what's your take on Bitcoin?
Not much. It's weird. I think for me, even though my work is interested about redesigning money, for me, in a practical sense, money is a lesser thing than an institution, which is more, I mean, it's tried and tested. And I think the problem with Bitcoin is that it doesn't, for me, have that institution, whether it's like a building society or something like that. It doesn't have a foundation of kind of principles in which it's established. It seems to just want to mitigate everything in order to gain. I don't know. Yeah, that's probably it.
Yeah, and Ollie, maybe because the question came from you, maybe you can give us a little bit more background on where this question comes from. Why do you?
Yeah, I was just going to. Thank you. I was just going to add some precision because the new example that you give, there's some kind of burning of a product, and I feel that with the Bitcoin, you see that in the virtual world. We're literally burning time and computer kind of processing power just to get to come up to the transaction or the thing to be able to use as a transaction. So I thought there was some, a correlation there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never thought it like that. Possibly, I think that though there's still that they want to burn energy in order to perform something, in order to escalate it. The kind of the amount of value that it has. Whereas I think the burning would be essentially if that was applied to Bitcoin from the one that I showed, would be burning the computers. I think. To stop that kind of exponential growth. But thanks for your question, Ollie.
Okay, thanks a lot. Then moving on to the questions, let me check here. There were a number of questions from Melanie, and I think I first want to go. I think you answered to the one on the zebra movement, so I think we can read about that in the chat. So I'm going to skip that, and I want to move to that other question that was there by Diana, and rather maybe then giving us, let's say, a generic explanation on how to grow the post-growth entrepreneurship movement and how do you convince traditional entrepreneurs to become non-extractive. I was wondering, do you have a very specific case that you can explain to us? Like in this case, this for me was a success story where I did succeed in convincing a traditional entrepreneur. So maybe you could answer that first rather than on the higher level.
Sure. So I think that you'd be really surprised, but the majority of people in the traditional business world are actually really receptive to social ideas. Because the majority of people in the world are the 99%, and also the majority of people want to do the right thing. And if you present them with an opportunity to do the right thing, that doesn't cost them too much effort, then most of the time they will do it. So, I mean, some of the successes include, getting a post-growth entrepreneurship course into a business school, because of course, the Vrije Universiteit School of Business is a traditional school of business. It's not Impact Hub. It's, I mean, this is the traditional establishment. I've given talks. I'm a lecturer at Singularity University in their cyberspace program, and of course, anybody who knows SU knows that they're all about the exponentials. But I've actually also been invited by both Singularity Netherlands as well as Singularity South Africa to give talks about post-growth entrepreneurship, just quite simply because they find it to be an interesting, socially relevant topic. I've also worked together with the Amsterdam Center for Entrepreneurship, ACE Venture Lab, which is the Amsterdam-based startup incubator that's associated with the university and college system in Amsterdam. And I've also been part of their startup bootcamp and actually have given lectures on post-growth entrepreneurship to their class of startup founders. So by and large, I think the more traditional business world is actually quite receptive. And it's not to say that immediately all of them are going to start creating post-growth businesses. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But typically the way that it works is you start with a couple case studies. And it's just like the book Crossing the Chasm. You know, you start with a very small group of like-minded early adopters. You know, we then can basically take that leap and create MVPs, create prototypes of this idea. At that point, we've got living, breathing businesses with books, you know, and finances that you can analyze. And then, you know, at a certain point, we start showing this success story, and that slowly starts winning over the skeptics. I mean, this is also sort of how it went with my nonprofit computer security consultancy company, Radically Open Security. Our very first few customers were just like total hippies, you know, who cared about this kind of stuff. But then at a certain point, you know, we started attracting really great staff, and our quality was amazing, you know. And at this point, we've built, I would not hesitate to say, one of the best pen testing companies in the Netherlands, which is evidenced by the fact that we were hired in by the Dutch Ministry of Health to pen test the Corona Miller, and our you know, our pen test report is going, you know, to the Tweede Kamer. So, you know, so in this sense, I mean, once you actually have real life case studies that people can emulate, then folks will start copying. And once there's enough of a handful of, you know, case studies that are successes, people will start emulating it. Because of course, the more actual real examples that you have, the more you start validating the idea. And if you can validate it enough and build a large enough community, then it starts, you know, working its way into the establishment and becoming sort of an established, proven way of doing things.
Okay, thank you. And then maybe related to that, I was already wanted to ask you, because I read, yeah, I think a few months ago in the media about that now the Netherlands has a new legal structure for social profit companies. You're probably aware of that, and is that in any way related to your efforts, or is that valuable to your efforts? What's the relationship between?
Yeah, so you're referring to the BVM, the BV Maatschappelijk, which is a really excellent initiative by Social Enterprise NL. You know, it's great that we're starting to get limited profit business entities in the Netherlands. Of course, this is following the footsteps of the B Corporation, the LC3, you know, a number of other, also in Germany, they have one. You know, so it's great that we're moving in this direction. But at the same time, I think that low extraction is not no extraction. And, you know, I think that it's the same thing with impact investors versus normal investors. It could very well be with the impact investors that they only want to see 5x growth rather than 10x growth. But for me, I mean, as long as you still have this push for this growth, you know, it's still going to cause this perverse incentivization and sort of incorrectly incentivized decision making that's going to cause social and environmental problems. So I think it's a step in the right direction, but I think it also doesn't necessarily go far enough. But that being said, I think you also don't necessarily need purpose-made entities in order to create extraction-free businesses. I've been working with a lawyer, Sophie from London, to actually create some contracts and statutes that can actually lock in making post-growth companies stay post-growth. And you can actually do this by hacking contract law in the same way that the open source movement with the GPL and the Creative Commons license used standard contract law to lock in certain clauses about intellectual property. So I think that we can similarly hack together contract law to be able to create, you know, these three parts of the definition of post-growth: bootstrapping, flat growth, non-extraction, to actually be able to lock these things in contractually. So in the end, who knows, we might not even need a purpose-fit entity.
Okay, thank you. Well, what you said about low extraction is not no extraction makes me think about a comment that Rion Brandt, one of the lecturers, made during the Q&A. He said that maybe one scenario can be like first aid to stop the bleeding before we can take people to the hospital for reconstructive surgery. So I think maybe also low extraction can be the thing to stop the bleeding and to really move on to the no extraction scenario. But which I think brings us also to the question that Austin had for you, Melanie. Like, can you reflect a little bit on mitigating growth, how you approach that? What's your point of view on that, and what tools do you maybe use to initiate that?
Sorry, what exactly do you mean by mitigating growth?
Yeah, maybe Austin, you can maybe.
Yeah, you might have. It was when I was listening to parts. I had a delivery halfway through, so you might have already spoken about this. I had to answer the door to, but it's interesting. I wonder if you know, that kind of curve and flattening it out. What if it is exponential in terms of the amount of kind of interest, this kind of that it's gathered in the company? Is it still, do you have to somehow mitigate that, or is it just, maybe I've misunderstood?
Yeah. I think, to be honest, that the majority of businesses anyway have relatively flat growth curves, because I mean that's just sort of the way that it is. I mean, if you're growing a business that is not going to be completely revenue losing, the problem is these days real businesses that actually try to be revenue positive and that have a business model and a value proposition. And on the other hand, you have these sort of Silicon Valley revenue losing, cashing out shell entities, you know, for lack of a better word. And with them, they don't actually need to have any customers. They basically just, it's like a battery chicken. You know, you force feed them this capital from investors and use that to sort of artificially plump them to attractiveness in 3 to 5 years. You know, the fact that they then are revenue losing, whatever, let's ignore this inconvenient fact for the moment. And what it is it's a kind of pump and dump scheme onto the public markets. and what winds up happening is, you know, if they have you know, a visionary enough CEO, you know, with a great story, and they can hype this, then they can basically dump this revenue losing company onto the stock market. Anyone who buys the shares, of course, is going to wind up losing money. You know, because the company's revenue losing, and ultimately it's always the last investor that winds up holding the bag, you know, when things go south. You know, unfortunately, I think this is how we're actually being taught to do entrepreneurship, because I mean, of course, WeWork is the most egregious example of this, but you know, we've got in the Netherlands, you know, our Prince Constantine, who's the special envoy for Startup Delta, which is one of the main governmental, you know, incubator organizations, and he's saying, you know, the Netherlands needs to be a country of unicorns. You know, I mean, we need to talk to the government and get them to understand that this is not in anybody's best interest. It's not in the best interest of the citizens to have these, you know, to promote this kind of like pump and dump neoliberalism, you know, and it's also not even in the best interest of the government, because then you start getting situations like companies that are acquired, which cause governance issues with data and privacy. And even if you look at, like, there was a company at the University of Leiden who was making coronavirus vaccines, you know, and they wound up getting acquired by some other company in the United States. And now this Leiden-based company is only going to be producing coronavirus vaccines for the United States. You know, this is not in the best interest even of the Dutch government. So I think slowly this memo is starting to get through to them. But I think what we need to do is we need to get them to understand that the powers that be, including the RVO and Economies, and, you know, they need to have a moment of introspection, asking the questions like the way that we're structuring the startup ecosystem now. Sure, we're just copying Silicon Valley in this, but is this actually in our best interest, you know? And the way that Germany has the Rhinelands model, I mean, you know, maybe here in the Netherlands, we could, you know, also try our own new ways. It could be post-growth entrepreneurship or any other, you know, methods. But, you know, this is a chance really to try something new, to distinguish ourselves. And this is a discourse that I think we need to start.
It makes me think of sort of like Trump's idea of fake. So maybe it's actually fake growth that is the kind of counter that you could throw out there. That it's not real. It's not related to any kind of positive social impact.
Right. I mean, define growth. I mean, if growth is revenue, then those companies absolutely, you know, or if growth is profitability, that. But this is really a problem with our semantics, you know, and we need to clarify those semantics. There's another ambiguity in the word profit, which I think is also problematic. The word profit has a double meaning. On the one hand, we consider profit, well, the first definition of the word profit is what I call margin on turnover. So basically that would be the sort of profit margin that you reinvest into a company to build a stable platform. That's necessary to run a company. The second definition of the word profit is extraction. You know, but the problem is that because those two meanings are embedded into the same word, you know, if you know, people get confused. So they'll say things like, well, of course my company has to be profitable, you know, to succeed. Yeah, but which definition of this word profit are you talking about? If you're talking about margin on turnover, I totally agree with you. If you're talking about extraction, not only do I vehemently disagree, but I think that it's actually at the root of all of our problems. And until we can get this language right, get these semantics right, you know, this is the system, you know, in the very language that we use. And until we can understand this embedded ideology in the language that we're using, then we don't have the practical tools to solve the problem.
Okay, thanks a lot, Melanie. I can feel your passion. It's really great. Let's maybe first, if you would allow me, I before going to the questions that were there for Max, I have one question for James as well. Is that you were talking about obviously let's say the form factor and the identity of bank cards being part of our identity. Also giving some examples on what they could be and they are not at this moment. My question would be, do you think it's a coincidence that the same way that people say the dog always looks like his boss, right? Do you think it's a coincidence that bank cards, like the identity of bank cards in a way is related to the identity of our economic system or not? Or
yeah, I mean, in some ways, I think they've kind of evolved into what they are as a utility, you know, so they fit into our wallets that fit into our pockets. But you know, it's kind of it's sort of really interesting that the form hasn't changed very much in the last, you know, 20 years. Although we're beginning to see, you know, things like, you know, phones and watches and even rings, you know, you know, that sort of act as our cards. I mean, when those things are less visible, it makes, you know, the question even more sort of, you know, apposite, I think, about what our relationship with money is, where, you know, it's so invisible. There's no even that physical, tangible little square of plastic. So I'm kind of, yeah, I'm interested in what the direction of travel is for that, and how we sort of reinterpret that last remaining hook into the real with the kind of unrealness of the economy and money. But I'm also kind of, you know, listening to all the speakers today, I'm actually quite optimistic about where that's going. I think it's, you know, looking at the kind of pandemic and the way that we're changing the way we're working, maybe that's going to mean that we're changing our relationship with, you know, with money and our role in the economy. And you know, I've been working for a client since last August, and you know, since March this year, we've all been working, you know, from home. They're saying that we're all going to be continuing to work from home until, you know, the next calendar year. And that's a huge, huge shift that we couldn't have imagined, you know, 6 months ago, I suppose. So maybe there's a similar shift that we can make in, you know, having that kind of economy that I talked about that we deserve, perhaps, rather than one that's been created for us by super capitalism.
Okay, thank you. And moving on to the questions from Max, I think we already answered one. Can we join? So that's nice. And then there was one question from Olga, like you mentioned taxes, and what's your view on taxes versus the system in Uzupis? And I think the reason you said we mentioned taxes is because you're obviously still citizens from not only Uzupis, from another country or nation, but can you elaborate a little bit on what's your take on taxes in relation to Uzupis? If Max is still there. Oh, I think we lost Max. So, well, we have to keep that question for another time. And then here I see one final question posted by Joseph for Austin. So in your speculative time, would you say that the burning currency is a metaphor of money? We can pay ourselves with it, it self-destroys once you give it away.
Metaphor, yeah, possibly. I'd like to think of the projects that I've done as palpable thought experiments. I think as soon as you say metaphor, it's easy to dismiss. So I don't think any of the things that I create are going to have they're not going to be implemented into the world anytime soon. That's probably a good thing. But it's more of a way to kind of step out of our current understanding of what money is, to try and think of what money could be, and how it could radically change things if we did change currency and maybe found a resonance within society or that. But I don't know if I've answered that question. I'm sorry, Joseph, if you want to elaborate. Or
if Joseph is still there. Yep,
I am here. So sorry, I because I am listening to you and at the same time I was typing, so actually I exchanged the words time and money in my question. So I was meaning a metaphor for time, of course. So something which kind of self-destructs as soon as you give it away. So
yeah,
I think my question makes more sense.
Yeah, so there are systems of time-based currencies, aren't there?
Exactly. I was kind of thinking in this direction.
But then that's still a kind of commodity. So a bit like gold, a bit like something else, there's still something physical. Well, not physical, but I mean, there's still something that you can measure, we understand as time. Whereas I think the thing that I was doing was just, it wasn't, yeah, metaphor for time. I don't know. I'm sorry. I can't answer it. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's
don't worry. Don't feel forced to answer them. Also.
Thank you for your reaction. That's totally
time.
I think it's the best compliment that you can give someone from the audience, to ask a question that leaves the speaker puzzled. I think it's also the best way to wrap up this Q&A. So I think now it's time for us all to go into the lunch break, or the breakfast break for some of you maybe.